Sarah Robb O'Hagan, how are you today?
I'm great, Chris. How are you?
I am doing wonderfully. We really appreciate you being here and talking about all kinds of things. First of all, I gotta say that I am thoroughly looking forward to this interview because if your personal writing and your LinkedIn page is any indication, you're probably one of the most exuberant and interesting CEOs I've ever interviewed.
Exuberant. That's a great word. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's you're very excited about your career and the way you've waged it. You have reason to be. You've done a lot of really interesting things. I just could not believe the diversity of it. From marketing manager for Air New Zealand, director of marketing for Virgin Atlantic. Then you went to Atari as a VP of marketing. Interesting, switch. Then, marketing director for Nike, president at Gatorade, fellow at the Aspen Institute. Then you founded your own company, and now you're at EXOS. Wow, I mean, that's quite a journey.
Yeah, it is quite a journey. You're right. It makes me feel old, which I am.
No, I think you're just obviously a very interesting individual who likes doing a lot of different things. Do a nice segue for everybody here and tell them, how that all got you to EXOS and what EXOS is about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would start by saying that I actually think when you look back on a career, there's more connective tissue than it might have seemed at the time. So as you stated, I began my career in airlines, and my entire strategy as a young New Zealander was pick something that will fly me out of the country because I wanted to go explore the world. And I really always wanted to get into sports, fitness, health, wellness, performance. That was just a personal passion. And then once that finally happened, and I kind of guided my way towards EXOS and what is effectively human coaching in the broadest context, it's amazing how you go back and realize that, like, an experience at an airline, who would have thought that would have anything to do with human performance coaching? But it's human capital delivering a service experience. And so they're actually very connected when you really think about it. So I'm a big believer that great careers, it's like if you can put together lots of experiences and then bring them together when you get closer to my age, where it's all starting to, you're really leading at the CEO level, it can kind of work out well.
And tell everybody a little bit about what EXOS does. I mean, we honored you in the social capital section, and what we talk about in social capital is the whole concept of profits come from treating people better and companies taking care of people. And when you look at how to do that and how to help companies do that, I mean, EXOS is an important teammate in being able to do something like that, right?
Totally. So EXOS, we are a human coaching company. And what we say we do, what we do every day is we get humans ready for the moments that matter most in their lives. And that ranges from an elite professional athlete who's training to try out for the NFL Combine, and that's the biggest moment in that person's life, like a job interview for their future sports career, through to executives just like you and me. And their moment might be, I'm trying to handle myself better stress-wise with everything coming at me in the stress of a big board meeting. It could be that they want to improve their risk-taking and courage around like more innovative thinking, and we're trying to help them develop to prepare for those kind of moments. So what we do is we have several thousand coaches around the world who work with individuals to essentially figure out what is it that they want to achieve and how can we guide them as their guide on the side, as their support system, putting everything together, essentially incorporating techniques around psychology and biology. So many people don't actually know that, if you have been sitting in your chair for the last year in the pandemic and you've got back pain, that may lead to you not sleeping well, which may lead to you not eating well, and all those things can basically begin a really negative cycle that affects your psychology. So we're there to help you unpack all of those things. And how do we get your physical body working for you, your psychology working for you, so you show up every day ready to crush it?
So that basically focusing on the human behind the worker, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I would say the human behind the worker, and you know this better than anyone with what you do for a job, over the last 3 to 5 years in particular, is more stressed than they've ever been because of this new way of working, because we're staring at small screens all day, because the sort of collapsing of our work and life blurring on top of each other. And so we believe it's our job to help that human increase their capacity to deal with what this new work world is throwing at them.
And you got thousands of coaches. So, how many people are you dealing with or helping, would you say, on a yearly basis?
Great question. So we have about 300,000 a month coming and engaging with our coaches in the corporate environment. Yeah. So it's definitely a fairly sizable business. And then our biggest business is corporate executives, but then we also have this elite sport business where we're working with professional athletes in many different sports, actually, also on a monthly basis.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you see, especially on the corporate side? We have this image, right, of corporate executives being bulletproof.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. Obviously, they're not. They're human beings. What do you see as the biggest, I don't know if you want to say surprise, but, maybe consistently vulnerability, should we say, of corporate executives?
Yeah. Well, I would say now more than any other time, the vulnerability is that corporate executives are finally putting their hands up and saying, I can't take it anymore. And I think we saw that in the pandemic with the Great Resignation and all the things that we saw. We hear from our clients, many of which are human resources professionals, that they've never had such burned out executives ever. And I think what we're learning is that, it's funny that our company started in the business of elite sports and athletes, because it's a good metaphor for corporate executives. Like if you said to an athlete, you have to work out physically for 18 hours a day and expect your performance to be at its best, anyone would go, that's ridiculous. You have to recover, right? It's just logical.
Yeah.
Yet as corporate executives, we all just kept going, add more to the plate, add more to the plate. And we would find ourselves working 10, 12, 14-hour days and then wondering why everyone's just exhausted. And so what we're learning is that it's actually a leadership challenge for the most senior executives to understand, how do you create a culture that enables recovery, like what we call pro-recovery? Because if you can set that tone for your team, you are going to make a huge difference in their engagement, how excited they are to be at work, and ultimately how productive they are, because you're helping them feel great at their day, as opposed to, Sunday night, here goes, I'm exhausted for the week ahead.
Yeah. We have interviewed a lot of CEOs who now are, trying to recognize that in their people, and making sure that their people take time off. Almost a mandatory vacation deal or whatever. Hey, you got to take 2-3 weeks off and just shut off in some way, shape, or form. But we do that with ourselves, right? Do we do that? Do the leaders do that themselves? And I think there's probably a misnomer out there, and you'd probably agree, that the leaders, the CEOs, they've got the life, right? They're getting paid well, they're getting, all the benefits and whatnot that they need. But a lot of the leaders that are very devoted are just going to keep going and going and going and going. And, eventually, just like a pro athlete, you just can't do that anymore. You break down. What are some of the issues that you see that they face, that, you go to them and say, hey, look, you need to do this because otherwise this is going to happen.
Yeah, right. I mean, first of all, it's, your point about, yes, you definitely need to take vacation, but it's actually, that's not enough. Like, that's almost like, when you've gotten to the extreme problem and, it's so extreme that that's not going to fix the root cause. The root cause is, how do you change your lifestyle day in, day out to ensure that you are more able to deal with the stresses of modern work? And believe it or not, this sounds so simple, but us with our little eyeballs staring at the screen all day long is incredibly exhausting for the human brain compared to standing outside, looking at the horizon of the sky, right? So little things that we teach our most senior executives is, can you replace, like culturally, replace all day long Zooms with walk and talks? Like, tell your executives, if it's a one-on-one conversation, why does it have to be a Zoom? Why does it have to have a camera on? Can you walk while you're doing it? Can you be outside, be looking at the environment? It's amazing that tiny little change makes a huge difference to how you feel at the end of the day. Or likewise, long meetings. Like, we at our company, we have put cultural change and rules in place. Like, at a certain point of time, we stop, we turn off the camera, and we do what we call a recharge break, which is breath work that helps you just get more oxygen into your brain to get you energized for the afternoon and the work to come. So it's little things like that you can do day in, day out, which just enable you and your body and brain to get through the day in a way that, if you don't, and then you wait till you're taking a vacation, you're so exhausted that the whole vacation is going to be given up sleeping through it, most likely.
Wow, you just changed my life just by saying that, because that's exactly what I wind up doing. I get to a point where I'm just exhausted, and then I got to take all this time off. And during that time, I'm mostly just trying to, get my energy back. And, by the time the vacation's done, I'm just barely back to functional. So that's an incredibly good point. And I love how that you can see, the overlap with the athletes and whatnot, and how that really can emanates from that background in coaching athletes as well, because that's really what we are in business. When you think about it, we're kind of like a pro athlete when, at a higher level.
And I think it's the other parallel to the athletes is, like, you would be surprised how often in our history training athletes would come overtrained. Like, that was their biggest issue, is like whether it was putting too much what we call load, like weight on the body, without, because we are very structured, our teams are, in terms of how they add load and then force recovery before you add more load. And a lot of athletes were overtrained, and it was so counterintuitive to say, if we take away some of this and build in meaningful recovery time, your performance is going to improve overnight. And it always does. And it's the exact same metaphor for us in corporate America. It's like, It's so hard, because you kind of go, well, if I get this last thing done tonight, it won't be on my to-do list tomorrow. But what you will have done is start yourself where you feel groggy and blurred and you're not as effective anyway. So if you could have just really forced in that recovery time, it would have made a difference.
So one of the interesting things that you probably encounter, and you could probably speak to really well, is, a lot of the executives and whatnot that we talk to, I had mentioned this at the beginning, they're always talking about ways to, at least the good ones, the ones that we focus on and we honor, they're always talking about ways to take care of their employees and make sure that their, employees are healthy in one way, shape, or form or another. But we've had a couple of CEOs who talked about the fact that they forget about themselves, and they forget to do that for themselves. And do you encounter that a lot, and find that the people, they're worrying about this for their employees, but maybe they just don't think they need to do it?
That's an interesting question. I would definitely say that the vast majority are worrying about their employees first and foremost, for sure. But I don't know it's that they don't think they need to do it as much as I think we would all be surprised how many senior leaders get to that level without having had just fundamentals and education around the stuff. And I also think the workplace culturally has changed in the last 20 years. Like, I've often told the story about when I was in my late 30s. So I was running Gatorade globally. I just had my third child. I only did 2 weeks of maternity leave because it was a turnaround. It was exhausting. And I was like back at work and totally burned myself out, like to a crisp. And in those days, that was kind of the way we worked. And I remember at the time, again, I was working in the sport business, and you're seeing athletes surrounded with coaches and therapists and support teams to help them learn all the stuff we're talking about. And I remember sitting there going, no one's doing this for the executives. Like, why not? Right?
Yeah.
But fast forward to now, I think there's a real appetite for it. But it's like, when do you add that to your plate of things to get educated on? And so I think that's where, like, in the last few years of the pandemic, at our company, EXOS, we spent a lot of time building programming for leaders and teams to help them, A, learn what they can do differently just to improve their own day, B, figure out together how we're going to create a culture of what we call readiness together. Like that involves the leader and the team saying, we've all agreed that we're going to turn our cameras off on Fridays or whatever. What are those little cultural norms that we all know will make a difference for all of us? And I think the more we help educate those senior leaders, the more they're going to be comfortable making change because they'll see it works.
And you make it easy, right? In other words, talking about, this is another thing we have to do. If they come to you, you're going to take care of that. They don't have to figure it out. They don't have to plan it, right? You're going to do all that within their company.
Yeah. The way we work is like, we do believe that, cultural change, and you talked about social capital, cultural change, it has to come from the top. So, we have a lot of programming that we do for everyday people at the workplace. But if you don't have the leader educated first and working with their, C-suite, so to speak, on how we're going to move our culture forward to be a pro-recovery culture, it's really hard for the person who's, 4 rungs down saying, hey, I want to turn my camera off on a Friday if no one said that's okay, So it's important to sort of operate at all levels, which is why we tend to come in and start from the top and start at the bottom and bring them both together.
Connected to that, do you see that when leaders do this and when leaders inculcate this in their own lives, that they become more understanding of the people that they lead and how those people need this?
Yeah, 100%. So I'll give you a very, very simple example. One of the programs we do called the Team Builder, it's about everybody, fills out their own little profile around their recovery needs. And it is so illuminating as a leader. I'm in this business, and I learned about my own team going through it, where I learned that my needs for recovery are involving a lot of people, social, that like helps get me fueled and energized. For the introverts on my team, that's exhausting. That's like, at the end of the day, I want to just hide, right? When you learn that, you suddenly go, next time I plan an offsite, I'm going to think through who are the people that will come out with me for dinner, and like together we'll, really engage each other and fuel ourselves. And how do we create the space for the other group to just go quietly and do what they need to do? And it sounds so simple, but if you don't know that, you're just going to keep blasting on doing what you would normally do, right?
Yeah. That just makes me think of, in the olden days, before we had companies like yours that understood this more and really, put time and effort and research into this, the old idea was, okay, we're just going to take everybody and we're going to go climb a mountain, this month. And that's going to be our team building exercise. And we're all going to feel great, and then, you find out half of those people don't want to climb a mountain or don't want to get anywhere near a mountain,
Totally.
And so, we've come a long way, right?
Totally. 100%. 100%.
So, can you share a few of the, maybe some of the clients or companies that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, I mean, we work with 30% of the Fortune 100. So there's a lot of big names in there, including, let's see, Google, Citibank, Pfizer, Intel, like just a lot of big companies that we work with. So yeah, and we we tend to work with these really large companies that are trying to tackle these issues at scale. So that's what we, pride ourselves in being able to do.
And for you, what's your biggest, feel good moment when you go into these companies? And you've done so many things, and you're obviously a person that enjoys life and loves people. What makes you feel good about this?
Oh, it is the most rewarding business to be in, bar none, because you do get to see these real life stories that, of individual executives who were at the end of their rope, and through their connection with one of our coaches have managed to get into a completely different frame and a different outlook on life, and they're thriving. And it's just unbelievably rewarding for our individual coaches, through to the site teams that work with them, through to right up to me, because you hear these real stories every day, and you go, we're having real impact for individual humans, which matters.
Without naming names or companies or whatever, I mean, are there any that stick out in your head of people that you guys have helped?
Yeah, can I just quickly do a time check as well? I know you were a bit late, but I'm actually late for my next meeting.
Oh,
good.
You have 5 more minutes? Or do you have to go?
Probably 2.
2 minutes. Give me your favorite memory.
My favorite memory.
Of someone you've helped or your company's helped.
I mean, they're very personal discussions, right? So I don't know that I want to point to one person individually. I'd say, my favorite memories on a daily basis are when I get to, go out to the markets and, spend time with the teams individually, my teams, and really hear what's on their mind and how I can best sort of energize them because we always say we're the caretakers, but someone's got to take care of the caretakers. And I kind of see that to be my role to a large degree.